Well, shares of Broadcom have pared some of their losses, still under pressure though, after its lackluster sales forecast for the fourth quarter overshadowing its earnings beat. You can see it's down over 5.5% right now. Now, the Apple supplier is benefiting from a surge in AI spend, but its other divisions are falling short. For a deeper dive into the results, we are joined by Daniel Newman, Chief Executive Officer of the Futurum Group. Daniel, it's great to have you on. Appreciate you making the time for us. So I specifically want to focus in on their AI revenue coming in at $12 billion. They raised that AI revenue guidance and the business, of course, growing. Is that going to be enough to sustain Broadcom moving forward? It seems like the street doesn't think so.
Yeah, clearly the street wasn't happy. They were looking for some sort of outsized number, maybe 13 plus, the whisper number. The same thing happened with NVIDIA, came up with a pretty significant guidance upside. But this is a little more of a story about the diversification of the business as well. So the AI business is performing. You're going to have some complicated networking that Broadcom is going to help solve. And of course, these accelerators, these AI processors, Broadcom's in the driver's seat. They have won some really important designs. We know, or we speculate about Google, and of course, ByteDance. We heard about OpenAI. But at the same time, it's kind of like these 3 or 4 other parts of the business. So you've got their sort of core connectivity and networking business. That was a little bit off. Clearly, investors weren't happy to see that, but that's off market-wide. That's a macro issue. And then, of course, the VMware acquisition was a big one. But that part of the business performed really, really well. So when you kind of look at what's happening here, I think it's a company that was priced well. People thought AI was going to maybe have this explosive beat, and the core business has slowed a little bit, but has some favorable conditions to rotate back over these next few quarters.
Yeah, you mentioned VMware. They talked about, and Hock Tan, the CEO, talked about VMware bookings continuing to accelerate here. What type of net contribution to earnings over time are you modeling out for what VMware will bring to Broadcom here?
Yeah, we think that the VMware acquisition has a really strong play. I mean, Hock Tan came out at the recent VMware Explore, and really he wasn't going to compete so much directly with the normal competition, the Red Hats or some of the other virtualization softwares that we're so familiar. He really came out swinging and saying, look, we're going to compete with the public cloud. We believe that we can bring dollars back into enterprises, give them public cloud platforms, and help their businesses scale. Now, so far, despite some of the the way that Hock maybe is characterized in the market for how he runs his businesses, the software businesses, whether that's been CA, Brocade, now VMware, they perform well. He right sizes the businesses, he grows them. And I mean, that 60+% EBITDA contribution that he makes across the business is really, it's really important to the overall business. Having said that, it's going to take some time, and we need to see some proof points that this new private cloud solution, this new AI solution is going to land. I'm optimistic, but like I told Hock when I spoke to him last week, we need to see it in the numbers.
Well, that's fascinating, by the way, but I'm also curious about this idea that I've heard from some investors that they want to see Broadcom taking on an additional hyperscaler that they're going to make a chip for. I mean, right now, about 18% of their revenue is coming directly from Apple. In your conversations with Hock Tan, did you get any indication of a path forward for another hyperscaler to come on board?
Of course, we are hearing about some of the opportunities that exist out there. We know there's only really a couple of companies playing in this particular space. There's Broadcom and of course Marvell. They are very tight-lipped. They have certainly made indications that there is more opportunity out there. This $12 billion number has a lot of that XPU in it. And our model, our forecast for the chips market is showing that this accelerator market is going to outpace the GPU market by somewhere between 15 and 20% over the next 5 years. And so we know that whether it's the Microsoft and Amazon, and of course the Google TPUs, we heard about ByteDance, OpenAI, and then that's going to drive Apple. So across the board, we know that these AI accelerators are going to go big. And there's this whole compete situation going on with NVIDIA. No one really wants to talk about it, yet everyone wants to talk about it. Is there a DOJ probe? What's going on? But that competitive landscape, Broadcom plus an AMD, plus an Intel Gaudi, plus a hyperscaler accelerator does offer the most complete opportunity for something that could compete with NVIDIA. So it's a compelling story. They're not going to leak this per se, but all indications are this accelerator market's going to grow really quickly.
Just while we have you as well here, Dan, one of the other stories that we're tracking, the Biden administration rolled out some fresh export controls on quantum computers as China continues to make advances in the global chip industry. I mean, it's not even just the U.S. at this point. You've got Japan also making some sweeping adjustments there. I mean, my goodness, the Netherlands too. Don't upset the Dutch on this matter, but what does this mean when you have so many different countries and this latest effort from the U.S. to really try and curb or at least protect even more intellectual property? What does that signal to you?
Yeah, brother, it's interesting. I shared this morning some rumors out that in China, renting an A100 or an H100 actually costs less than in the US, which is the indicator to me, and we always talk about this, that China is getting enough supply, even though they're not supposed to be. So these controls they're really complicated, very nuanced, whether or not they work well and how effective they are. Having said that, the semiconductor supply chain is really complex. And you mentioned the Dutch, Japan, there's so many different parts. And by each one of these parts not being able to support China's needs, it creates more difficulty for China to really get to those most advanced nodes. The world, of course, wants to make sure that it maintains a global leadership position in semis as we move into 3 and 2 and these newest nodes from TSMC and from other foundry providers. They want China to be behind for a few years. I always say, Brad, don't rule them out, but the global supply chain of semiconductors and all of the policymakers are certainly going to make it very hard. I expect China to fight hard against it, but I don't expect this to slow down these policymakers and some of these export controls.
Daniel Newman, thanks so much for joining us this morning on All Things Chips. We appreciate it. Daniel is the Chief Executive Officer over at the Futurum Group.